Round 9. Los Angeles, it is Ed Wimpenny with blue-white auras up against Daniel Wong on Ramping Turns. Now, this is a name that you might remember. There's going to be some turns taken here, and that might seem a little bit familiar from Grand Prix Las Vegas last year. He was the one that top-aided with taking turns, and he's back to do it again, though a little bit less directly focused around it. This is a ramp deck that is going to be diving into Nexus of Fate. This deck is not what I expected to see, but it's going to be an Adorned Pouncer from the left side of the battlefield. It is white-blue auras, so we're going to be trying to stick some cards onto this one and try and make it as large as it can. This, of course, does already have Double Strike. That's going to come down, and now we have got Curious Obsession on it. Anytime it deals that damage, ooh, seal away.
Yeah, a really nice 2-for-1 right away there from Daniel Wong. Daniel Wong, one of the best people at casting a Time Warp in the entire world. Exciting to see him undefeated here going into day 2 with a Nexus of Fate deck.
Yeah, 7-0-1, and White Blue Aura's 8-0. We see a Knight of Grace come down to the battlefield. When talking to Ed, one of the things, how do you feel about this deck heading in? He was basically just saying, all of the removal that there is, most of it does not hit Adonto Vanguard, and that which does hit Adonto Vanguard doesn't hit Knight of Grace.
Yeah, so I mean, when you're playing against a deck that has primarily black removal, you can just suit up that Knight of Grace with as many auras as you could find. When you're playing against other decks, you just go for the Adonto Vanguard, and in doing so, it gives the deck a lot of resilience. And this is a deck that a lot of people were excited about a few months ago that never really stuck. And Ed is proving to us today that this deck may have what it takes to compete at a really high level.
I mean, 8-0 is nothing to scoff at. Absolutely. So we're going to see 2 Cartouche of Solidarity come down to the battlefield. That is going to be attacking in for 4. Now, if there does become a black permanent on the battlefield, there will be another point of damage. But for now, we are just going to make a couple of these warriors. We are going to attack in for 4, and Daniel Wong is going to fall down to 19. He did previously gain 3 life from this Gift of Paradise that we see on the plains. So heading into Wong's turn, and it's just going to be a nice, simple pass. He's holding up 4 mana, though.
Yeah, and that could be scary. I think I spotted a Settle the Wreckage in Daniel Wong's hand, which means that Ed could find himself in a world of hurt during this combat step right now.
All right, so we do have 2 of these warriors, and we're curious to see how he potentially plays around that 4 open mana in a white-based deck, especially a deck that's playing Gift of Paradise. You've got to be thinking that this is the Fog deck that we've seen all day. Really, the seal away is maybe a little bit of a tell that it's slightly different, but you still are probably playing around it very similarly. So we'll see if Wimpenny is able to kind of smell it, sniff it out.
I mean, this is a tough situation because your opponent's at 19. You really want to be applying as much pressure as possible. If he attacks with just the Knight, that's not really a huge attack.
That's a fun little fact, by the way. Wimpenny's teammate, Chris Iali, also playing the same Auras deck, and 7-1. There are 2 copies of this deck with 1 loss between them.
15-1 between a pair of people on the same deck?
Yeah.
That's absurd. Oh, man.
I
Folks
take
at
that as
home,
a sign.
put this together on Magic Online. This deck's, like, real easy to put together.
It's Adonto Vanguard down to the battlefield. That's going to be a 1-1. It attacks really well, though. Gets that +2/+0. And you can pay 4 life, give it indestructible until the end of turn. So we see Daniel Wong moving into it, and it is going to be Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. Not a whole lot of action yet. Wimpenny holding back, trying to stay patient with this damage, which is why Daniel Wong remains at 16. It's a pass back, and now it is 2 warriors. They do have Vigilance, which is a nice part. They were able to throw down that Cartouche of Knowledge, draw a card.
Yeah, it allows them to play offense and defense very well against other creature-based decks. Ed, he smelled the Settle the Wreckage. He played around it on the last turn. But just the way the cards have played out this game, the fact that Daniel had that seal away so early, it means that Ed's in a situation where no matter what he does, he's going to get punished unless he has some sort of counter magic or some sort of interesting play.
And we're going to be pointing these two creatures right at Teferi, still leaving back two of them as the auxiliary aggression for next turn if needed, if there's anything. And it's going to be Seal Away that comes down, still holding onto that copy of Settle the Wreckage. This is going to eliminate that Knight of Grace, also just cleanly gets rid of the Cartouche of Solidarity, even if in some world, I think Blue-White Auras, you know, maybe there's a Forsake the Worldly in the main deck, something like that. Even if that were to come down, you still are losing that +2/+2 from those auras. So the hit does take Teferi down to 3 loyalty, 2 seal aways, and now it is 2 warriors and an Adanto Vanguard trying to figure out how to approach into this ramping turns deck, how to apply that pressure, because Daniel Wong is still at 16. He's very comfortable on his life total. He's got this Teferi, which is going to really accelerate him into both mana and additional cards. He's got an Hour of Promise in hand, which is really actually a sweet card. In fact, I don't think he's got the 2 deserts at the moment, but even if he were to end up with one of those deserts, he would actually end up producing quite a few. No, it's Nexus of Fate already, going for a play that we did see last time, using that Teferi plus, which untaps 2 lands at the end step, combining that with the trigger on the stack to generate the 7 mana to take the additional turn, and we're off to the races for Daniel Wong. No stranger to a Time Warp effect.
Not at all, and he has this this hour in his hand. He's just got all of the tools that he needs to take this game over at this point.
Nexus of Fate, just a powerful card. Even at its worst, you know, you're drawing an extra card, you're playing an extra land, you're getting another activation out of Teferi, and that's if you really don't do much with it. And that's a lot. Hashep Oasis going to come down to the battlefield. That does mark the 2nd desert, by the way. So now Hour of Promise is looking like a very good option. This is going to search the library for 2 lands. They could be absolutely any land. It does not have any requirements for basics like you see on a lot of these ramp spells, on these acceleration spells that we see. So it's going to be Scavenging Grounds, and it is going to be one other, and then this is Arch of Arazka, and I think we're at the threshold.
Yeah, I think we have the blessing of the city at this point.
And that is going to be the last desert required. So it is going to be 2 of these zombies entering the battlefield with that Scavenger Grounds, and that is the 3, the magic number. Now who's the aggressor?
Yeah, I mean, Ed, even with what he has on the board, he can't fight through and attack this Teferi through those zombies.
SRAM coming down. Now this is going to be, it's one of the more powerful cards for this one. When you are playing it, you know, every time that you start putting down one of these, it's whenever you cast an aura, then you're going to be drawing a card. And that really does mean that the traditional situation of if you try and cast one, if they remove it, you're now down 2 cards. Having that ability to draw a card anytime that you cast it is a really nice benefit to somewhat negate that. Though, Commit to Memory is going to go ahead and throw that one back into the library. It's going to have to try again later.
Yeah, and Daniel Wong, recognizing that he couldn't let the SRAM resolve, it would give Ed an opportunity to draw extra cards, uses the commit while the SRAM is on the stack, and puts it tucked neatly underneath that top card of the library.
Squire's Devotion coming down. That's +1/+1 lifelink, and it creates another vampire that is going to have that same lifelink ability. So this is going to be gaining Ed some life. I don't know how relevant that's going to be in this matchup. This doesn't really seem like the aggressive kind of game plan where having that additional 3 life is really going to be a game changer, but it's more aggression, it's more damage, it's more ways to really try and pressure Daniel Wong's life total, and this is kind of a stage where Daniel Wong is continuing to really solidify this game. Mana, no longer an issue. Teferi, off to the races, rocking and rolling. Spring to Mind, now in hand, and we've got these 2 zombies, which are fine on defense currently.
Yeah, and they can actually get pretty large pretty easily with all the deserts that Daniel has in play right now. I think that one of the things that's interesting about his deck is that his win condition, well, obviously his win condition is to just bury the opponent at card advantage and run them out of resources. But the way he actually wins the game is simply with the zombies that he's getting off of Hour of Promise.
That and Teferi, I imagine. You know, once you have Nexus of Fate and you're going to be continually shuffling that in, there is that nice bit of inevitability. At a certain point, you'll be the one taking all of the turns,
Yep.
And your opponent will be hanging out, waiting for you to figure out how you want to do it, whether it's with that Teferi ultimate, whether it's by just getting enough of these zombies to attack in. The game's going to end up, you know, if you are that far gone in the game, Daniel Wong is going to be the victor. We're really seeing Wimpenny struggle with this game plan. It's a Night of Grace, but just the attacks have not been coming together, the ability to pressure this life total. Daniel Wong has been at 16 since the early turns of the game, and he has not felt any pressure since.
Yeah, Daniel Wong, fortunate to have drawn that early seal away. The second copy wasn't necessary. I mean, he's had this Settle the Wreckage in his hand for the entirety of the game, but seal away on turn 3, exiling that Adoran Pouncer, it really just took all the wind out of Ed's sails. Ed was hoping to draw 2 cards there. Instead, he had 2 of his cards dealt with for just 2 mana from Daniel Wong, and it just put him in a position where it was really hard to pressure Daniel in any sort of significant way.
Search for Azcanta coming down to the battlefield. When you think of Teferi, you think of Search for Azcanta. This combination has been happening throughout the realm of Standard since Dominaria really entered the scene. These 2 cards have been best friends. It's now on the battlefield, and this is just going to be another, you know, notch on this tightening the gears to just close out this game.
Absolutely, and you know, I've never seen it
settle
before.
The wreckage.
I've never seen it before, but Daniel here has the opportunity. I think he has enough mana to do it. Also, he will in the near future to activate Arch of Arazka and Azcanta the Sunken Ruin, and then untap Arch of Arazka and Azcanta the Sunken Ruin, so that he can activate both of them twice a turn. We've seen, you know, either one activated twice a turn before, but I think this is the first time I've ever witnessed both of them having that level of power.
You know, if you might have thought Edwin Petty had a board before, but he felt the same thing. He needed to get some pressure on. He swung for the fences, and the fences swung back. Settle the Wreckage, threw all those cards into exile. The basic lands hit the field, and now it is SRAM all alone, facing down zombies, the hero of Dominaria, the search for Azcanta. And we're going to be transforming this Spring to Mind into Azcanta the Sunken Ruin, and we draw into another copy of Settle the Wreckage. If 1 wasn't enough, 2 is certainly going to be just the way to put the ball and chain on this match, or on this game.
Absolutely. I think that Ed, in this matchup in particular, really wants to be landing a SRAM early and then not be attacking with it. It seems like Daniel, his forms of removal are things like Seal Away and Settle the Wreckage. So having a SRAM sit on the battlefield while you try to cast your other auras can create a card advantage engine that might be able to stand up to the long-term game plan of Daniel.
So now we're looking at a world in which these 2 zombies are attacking in. We just cast a Nexus of Fate, which is why we see Daniel shuffling it up. There's 4 copies in the library. There's an Azcanta the Sunken Ruin, there's an Arch of Arazka, there's a Teferi on the battlefield. We are dangerously close to a situation in which this game is going to be solidifying. It's going to be next. Yep, Edwin Penny, he knows what is coming at this point. Daniel Wong, he's known for taking turns. Of course, this deck a little bit closer to a faking turns. Not really a true version of the deck, but he certainly makes it look like it there at the end. So he is going to be diving into Game 1, taking the win. And it's going to be getting ready for Game 2. Now, this Ramping Turns deck, I've been waiting this whole game. I've been so excited to talk about this. Jake, the sideboard of this deck is... You could have given me 10 guesses of the sideboard for this deck, and I never would have arrived at this. Tell me about it.
All right, so Daniel Wong's sideboard is a transformational sideboard that turns his deck into cat tribal.
Yeah,
that's right. You heard me correctly. In Game 1, Daniel Wong is a hard control deck that can only win the game with the tokens that he produces off of his Hour of Promise. And in Games 2 and 3, he has the option to turn into a cat tribal deck. 4 Pride Sovereign, 4 Regal Caracal, 4 Leonin War Leader, and 2 Shalai Voice of Plenty. So, if you're looking for hilarity, Daniel Wong's deck is definitely capable of that. The thing is I'm not sure that plan is better against a deck like Ed's. I think that Ed could very easily just not have a good game plan long term against what Daniel's trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
However, there's a chance that Ed decides he wants to dilute his deck with counter magic, with things like negates and whatnot, to try to deal with the haymaker spells that Daniel Wong was using in Game 1 to take over the game. If Ed dilutes his deck too much in that way, then the transformational sideboard could be correct for Daniel, because it would mean that Ed would have no way to interact with those creatures post-board, and the cats would just be too large.
Oh man, this might not be the time for it. Maybe we'll be able to catch Daniel Wong playing maybe later in the day, because I would love to just see even the look on the opponent's face as you are so prepared for what you thought was kind of the taken turns deck. I think there was enough here, seeing that spring to mind. Maybe you're thinking that it's an older version of the deck, similar to what we saw at the Pro Tour, or you know, maybe some sort of variant evolution on it. But Daniel Wong made it come together, and I love this sideboard. 14 cats, well, and a Shalai, and a negate. Nice. That is just brilliant. On Ed's side, he's got a couple of spell pierces in the main deck. You know, maybe some negates in the sideboard, but his options are going to be limited in interacting with that one. It would not entirely surprise me, and even from the sideboarding aspect, it might be a situation where, you know, Daniel Wong strikes me as this is a sideboard plan where you're either shuffling in all 15 or you're not touching one. Maybe the negate, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's really funny to me, and I'm not sure we're going to see the transformational sideboard right now, but I really, really hope we do. A funny thing, though, our Promise decks have been around for a long time. These Fog decks have been doing well as of late in Standard, but combining those two decks together, having an Our Promise deck that plays Nexus of Fate, this is something that was championed by Ali Antrazi shortly after the release of M19. And, you know, this is a deck, at least Daniel Wong's version, that looks very powerful to me. And it looks like he's found a very good balance and a very good plan to attack the metagame that currently exists. So a really exciting new take on, you know, one of the more popular archetypes in Standard. And some crazy stuff going on here. The cat sideboard is just blowing my mind. Like, I'm having a lot of trouble wrapping my head around it. Yesterday, there were a few casualties in the room here at Grand Prix Los Angeles, and I wasn't sure what they were about, but you know, it was really gruesome, and I think it was because people's heads were exploding when they were playing against Daniel Wong, and post-board, he was casting all of these cats.
By the way, look at that. Daniel Wong, you might remember him as well from Vegas. The big thing that got him a lot of attention is that he had quad-sleeved his deck for the event, if you remember that, Jake. I don't think this one's quad-sleeve, but that definitely looks like he's doing more than double.
Oh, my goodness. I'm impressed that he can even shuffle that.
It's triple. It is a...
Oh, he's on cap plan. He's on cap plan.
Did you see one?
I saw kitties.
All right. I'm so excited. Let's see it come together. I am beyond hyped to just see if we can see Cat Tribal take down Oro Tribal with this triple sleeve. It appears that the fourth sleeve was too much for him, you know? That one was too much. He's decided to go down to a very reasonable triple sleeve. Maybe it's every time that he makes a top 8, he just goes down one, you know? Or maybe it's by format, you know, Modern. He went up to 4 sleeves. For Standard, at 3. Maybe in Draft he goes down to 2. Something like that. It's by format.
His Modern Taking Turns deck is completely foiled out for what it's worth. It's really pretty.
Before the match, actually, Daniel did apologize. He said, sorry for slacking. Only 3 sleeves. The time frame, the time constraint of that 4th sleeve was just too much. He needed to be ready. He needed to get his rest here for day 2. Heading in 7-0-1. He's off to a great start.
Oh, yeah. And if you enter day 1 on the Grand Prix and somebody offers you a 7-0-1 start, you'd be very happy to take that.
All right, jumping into the second game here, things have started off with a SRAM, which is just going to attack in. Very reasonable, and those seal-aways are continuing to really run the game. It's the third turn. It's going to be a backup SRAM. When Penny was ready for it, he expected that one to go. The 2-2 for 2. Legendary creature. And
meow.
Oh my goodness, we are now making it happen. This is going to be Pride Sovereign coming down to the battlefield. It gives other cats you control +1/+1, or
It
does this?
does.
And it's got power. It gets +1/+1 for each cat that you control.
I believe so. So it
That's
gets
it.
an
It
additional
gives
+1/+1
itself.
for each cat you control, and then it makes cat tokens.
That's it. Yeah, I was thinking of the Regal Cockerel. Pride Sovereign, it's currently a 2/2. Any other cats coming down are going to make it even larger. I love one thing, by the way. So it's got this single white mana, exert it to create 2 1/1 cat creature tokens. It's almost like that exert feels like a lot less of a downside. I'm just kind of coming to this now in a deck with Nexus of Fate.
Yeah, and I think you can also kind of set it up so that you use that on your opponent's end step when you're not going to need it to be untapped, and you're going to use all of your mana on the next turn and won't have that 1 mana to tap into creating additional cats. It just seems like the card is pretty well suited for kind of a mid-rangey counter combo control deck, and obviously it's a card that you would expect to see primarily out of cat tribal aggressive decks, but here we are.
So Storm attacks in, trades with the Pride Sovereign. It's followed up by a Knight of Grace, which is followed up by Leonin War Leader, the 4/4 for 4 mana. And when it attacks, it's going to create more of these cats that are attacking. And it's going to be Knight of Grace as well as Adorned Pouncer entering the battlefield. So there's a double striking 1/1, 2 first striking 2/2s. A lot of damage on the other side of the board. These cats are actually not lining up that well right now.
No. But Daniel Wong, he has more cats.
He's got more. Leonin War Leaders are going to come down. It's the 4/4s. They are going to stand in the way of that board relatively well. I do like that, when Penny is willing to get in on this, he's going to have a cat of his own.
Oh, yes. I mean, there are cats on both sides of the table right now. This is
Shalai Voice of
this is
Plenty.
looking like the table needs an intervention. We need to find homes for some of these because there's no way these people can take care of all of them by themselves while living a productive life.
Shalai coming down to the battlefield. That's going to give these other cats hexproof as well as Daniel Wong. And I do love, because this is a ramp deck, that last ability of Voice of Plenty is also way more relevant in this. 6 mana, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. That's not unattainable at all.
Yeah, something that I really love about Shalai in this deck is that you attack with your war leaders, you create tons of these cat tokens, and then once the cat tokens are created, you pay the 6 mana and you put the +1/+1 counters on them.
Very nice. That's just good sequencing. I like it. We'll have to see that. Looks like we may not quite have the 6th land, though I think that was a Gift of Paradise that came down. It's Cartouche of Solidarity, which made a warrior that is going to give this creature +1/+1 as well. And First Strike, which not the most relevant on a double striking creature, but you know what? Just in case, double strike and First Strike. So we see this 3/4 Shalai attack in through the air, no reach, no flying. Cartouche of Knowledge really the only option that Edwin Penny has to eliminate that, and we're going to see Gift of Paradise come down, gain 3 life on this island, and it's going to be Negate instead. There was the option. Daniel Wong could have actually fought over that. He does have a copy of Negate himself.
Yeah, I like that Daniel Wong is willing to sit on that negate for a while. He understands that that Gift of Paradise isn't really worth fighting over. He has plenty to do. Still has that commit to memory, still has that settle the wreckage in hand. He wants to be protecting those big important spells. And if he's going to be going for a big settle the wreckage, Ed's probably going to be trying to back that up with a negate. And if he can negate that negate, it will likely result in the game ending in Daniel's favor.
Yeah, there's the very high possibility that when Penny is going to try and put together that turn of a full swing out, apply all the pressure with a little bit of ability to protect that game plan, maybe either Spell Pierce or, I guess when it's only 5 mana, Spell Pierce would do the trick. As it becomes 6 mana, then it gets a bit more difficult, though. Daniel Wong did draw a land for the turn, did not actually play it, and we see him now cycling it, and he's going to find a forest. So we're going to, untapping that 6 mana will now be available to him. He finds another copy of Settle the Wreckage.
Yeah, now this is just great for Daniel because he can keep on attacking in the air. If Ed wants to just continue to develop his board every single turn, Daniel is going to be pumping up his whole team with that activated ability on Shalai. And if Ed actually tries to go for something, tries to make some headway, then Daniel has the combination of Settle the Wreckage with Negate so that he can just completely blow up the game.
And it looks like we are going to see these +1/+1 counters hit the battlefield. They are on Shalai, which also just shortens the clock quite a bit. You know, we were looking at 4 turns before. Now we're looking at 3 turns. The difference between 3 power and 4 power is shortening the clock by an entire turn. And then, you know, it just means less draw steps for Wimpenny. For being a cat tribal deck, it's really Shalai that's doing all the work, by the way. I really feel like we're not giving Shalai the credit when we're saying that this is cat tribal.
Oh, these war leaders are holding the grounds. You know, they're just looking up at their owner who's flying through the sky.
They're
protecting them,
holding the line,
preventing them from being targeted.
It's going to be a pass back, another activation here. It's going to be more +1/+1 counters to the field. We've got some 6/6s cats on the defense. I mean, you're right. There's a reason why Ed Wimpenny has not been able to swing. It's another land as the draw. We do have 2 copies of Settle the Wreckage as well as that Commit to Memory. It's going to be another swing in for 5. And if nothing happens soon, Wimpenny's got to come up with something. At this point, even, you know, it might be a matter of Wimpenny playing out the SRAM and trying to cast a couple, you know, 1 aura, 2 auras to try and find even a Cartouche of Knowledge, something that can get this Adorned Pouncer in the way of it. But remember, Daniel Wong is still sitting on the negate, which is very likely going to be looking at that. So, Curious Obsession. Now this card's got to attack, or else it's going to go away. Finds himself a Plains, and I think that is going to be the end of the story. There's a Dive Down in hand. There's a Negate in hand. None of those are going to give him redraws with this SRAM Senior Edificer. Daniel Wong may have just gotten this done by sideboarding into cats and getting it done with angels.
Yeah. I love this deck. I love this deck. I'm a dog person, and I love this deck.
I'm more of a cat person. I find, like, regardless, I don't think that I could really have either one right now. I've got no pets, and that's just better for me because, I mean, I'm here. I'm traveling, you know?
Yeah, that's oh, it's worth it. You can find somebody to watch it when you go away.
True.
You know?
I'll have to investigate.
I mean, it's a best friend.
I might have to take home one of these war leaders, you know?
Yeah. Start small, you know, move up to a real cat.
True. Maybe I should start with something like an Adorned Pouncer.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Something 2 mana. A little bit more manageable for me.
Yeah.
So there is the swing, and there's the handshake, and it's Daniel Wong taking it down with Shalai, Voice of Plenty. Game 1 to see Daniel Wong.
At 8-0 at the GP. You don't expect that one.
I have to imagine that has been the situation. 8 times he's come away with the match win. I have to imagine that 8 times he has had that same reaction from his opponents. And it is just incredible. I'm excited, by the way. We're going to get the opportunity to talk to Daniel, and I cannot wait to ask him about how this sideboard plan came into being, because his weekend has to just be a story of his opponents having a look of utter shock.
His opponent's at 8-0, and he's playing against the guy, taking turns that transforms into cat tribal. When he won, I had to physically contain myself from clapping and having like the noise in the microphone.
So we're going to get to talk to him. Just looking at this deck, was there anything that really stood out to you? Do you think this is a deck that is really, like, do you think this is the real deal?
Yes. I mean, there's never been a standard deck that I've wanted to be the real deal more than this deck. Like, never in my entire life. Like, I'm legitimately, like, shook right now. I'm excited.
All right, well, Jake, you're all shook up, but let's go ahead and go down to Daniel. We're going to get the opportunity to talk to him a little bit. Daniel, it's TJ Rogers, Jake Van Loonen here.
Hey, Jake.
What a deck. How did you come to this?
So I was looking at the 5.0 lists on Magic Online about a week or 2 before the Pro Tour, and the Nexus of Fate decks really spoke to me. I'm really a big fan of taking extra turns. So I was playing them on Magic Online, and what I found was that my game 1s were really good, but I kept losing game 2s to cards like Argyle's Bloodfast or Glint Sleeves. Yeah, is that Glint Sleeves 7 or the 2-1 where you draw more cards? Mm-hmm. Whatever it is. It's just if my answers didn't line up well, like if my opponent plays a non-creature spell and I have Seal Away in my hand, I just feel like an idiot. Or if my opponent, plays their creature and I have my Forsake the Worldly, I just feel so dumb. So what I found is that varying my threats instead of trying to answer my opponent's threats was a way to go. And the best way to do that I found in these colors is with cats. So, yeah.
So we do have a question here. Of course, you had that incredible run at Grand Prix Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
question here from in the Twitch chat or in Twitter, Jadamalo. A little bit of details. How do you quad sleeve a deck? Is there recommendations on how to even go about this?
Yeah, you need sleeves that fit inside one another. So it gets hard after the third layer because that particular type of sleeve is really hard to find. But let's start from the beginning. So you have your perfect fits, right? That's layer 1. Okay. Then you put your normal sleeves on top of that, and that's layer 2. Then your character guards go over that. And those are the ones designed to protect your character print sleeves because those sleeves tend to like tear easily or whatever. And then the fourth layer, I use what's called KMC Strong Hards, which I had to order over a year ago from like eBay and a couple other sources because basically everything is sold out. And I checked recently, and I literally can't get any more. So. And
that's why you're on the triple sleeve here today.
Yeah, it's pretty unfortunate, but that's where we're at.
So first of all, this is Jacob Van Lunen, by the way. Big fan. Time Warp is my favorite card of all time. I have my original Tempest Time Warps laid out on my desk. When I'm playing Magic Online, they're always watching me. This was one of the most fun matches I've gotten to watch in years.
I'm happy to have been a part of it.
Now, a reactive game plan just seems really strong in this current standard environment. But post-board, you know, I've noticed a lot of people getting punished by things like Lifecrafters Bestiary and other things like that. And it seems like your plan of asking questions instead of, you know, trying to have the right answers post-board just seems brilliant to me. And
definitely.
The fact that you chose cats to do it is just blowing my mind. I wanted to, and I know the question has already been answered at this point of, you know, how you decided to move into this. But I was wondering why the one negate, and when does it come in? Is it just like the way the numbers line up, or is this specifically for other Nexus decks?
I felt like my matchup against Control was still a little bit bad, so I decided to just have a negate in there just in case. And it felt like pretty good insurance in that last match. I felt like I couldn't lose with both commit and negate in my hand. It's also why I didn't activate Shalai on the second to last turn of the game, just so that I could have those both up just in case my opponent had something.
Well played, well built.
Thank you very much.
I'm very excited to watch you continue playing throughout the day.
I mean,
thank you so much.
I've got one more question to ask.
Sure.
Daniel, are you a cat person or a dog person?
I used to be a cat person, but my girlfriend is kind of changing me to a dog person.
Nice.
Don't
switching
show
allegiances.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Daniel.
Thank you.
Good luck in the rest of the tournament.
Thank you very much.
Wow. Cats, it makes sense. You're in the colors for it. Just move into cats. That's got to be the answer.
I'm speechless. I'm so excited.
All right, so with that, we're going to have more Magic coming your way. It's Good Morning Magic here in round 9. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to round 9 here at Grand Prix Los Angeles. And we are kicking off with day 2, and we have got more Magic for you. So let's head on down to the battlefield. It's going to be Samuel Poncher up against Jacob Wilson, and blue-black midrange on the right side of the field. This is something that we've seen quite a bit. We saw Corey Burkhart top 8 with this last week. On the left side of the battlefield, Crixus Dragons. And I love this deck because really I think the term Crixus maybe doesn't represent what we're going to see as well as it could.
Yeah, I mean, the deck is essentially a mono-red deck that's splashing both blue and black. It's a Chain Whirler deck, but it gets to play the exceptionally powerful Nicol Bolas. This gives the deck a lot of insurance for when it gets flooded. That's one of the ways that the red-black deck can get punished in this format. It also just gives the deck a lot of top-end firepower. Like, this deck is much better against its mid-range counterparts because it goes so much larger with cards like Demanding Dragon and Nicol Bolas the Ravager.
So we do have a Glint Sleeve Siphoner attacking in. This is going to have 2 energy available, and now we're going to see this Sarkhan Fireblood. Now, this is going to be a big indicator of something that we are going to see. He's a Planeswalker that works very well with dragons, and looking at this deck list, he has got 10 dragons, 4 Nicol Bolas, 4 Glorybringer, 2 Demanding Dragon. Now, it does have that +1 ability if you go for it of you can discard a card if you do draw a card. But it's that other +1. Add 2 mana of any combination to your mana pool. Spend it only to cast dragon spells. So when you're talking 9 dragons, especially a double splash, this Sarkhan Fireblood is very good at making sure that you can actually cast your Nicol Bolas.
Yeah. Sorry. 3 mana card that produces 2 mana, obviously exceptionally powerful. Right now it's also driving a Heart of Kiran, making it especially cool. And Jacob's got to be scared right now. Samuel, he chose not to discard a card when he plussed that Sarkhan on the previous turn.
Yeah, likes all the cards in hand, and while this Glint Sleeve Siphoner is continuing to get the job done, we see Wilson down to 15. That is the 1 life loss from this Glint Sleeve Siphoner, as well as 4 from the Heart of Kiran that Sarkhan is just running around with right now, taking a little bit of a joyride. And it's going to be hit down to 1 loyalty counter, still able to go for that plus, and you know, it's such a weird position. We're now on turn 4. This is a deck that doesn't really get started before turn 3 in a lot of ways. And suddenly there's the potential for 6 mana. We could be throwing down a Demanding Dragon this turn.
Or Glorybringer.
Or Glorybringer. Oh, Essence Scatter is going to take that one out. Wilson, happy to have a 2-minute answer to that powerhouse. So now we are looking at this Sarkhan, though it's probably going to be going away. We're still now looking down the Glint Sleeve Siphoner. And really, there's only 2 Magma Sprays in the deck as a 1-mana option to eliminate this Glint Sleeve Siphoner. So it is very likely that this was the last turn that Sarkhan gets to drive the Heart of Kiran and gets to produce that mana.
And Jacob, I mean, he's navigating this game very well. He's ahead on cards now. He got to deal with that Sarkhan essentially without spending a card. His Glint Sleeve Siphoner has already refunded a card by itself. In doing so, Jacob has put himself in a really good position here. The major problem for Jacob right now is that he's already taken a lot of damage, and Samuel Poncher's deck is very good at dealing incidental damage with things like Demanding Dragon, Goblin Chain Whirler, and Haste creatures.
I am loving the idea right now. I see a Hostage Taker in Jacob Wilson's hand. Can you imagine a Nicol Bolas coming down, something like that, and then the Hostage Taker comes down and takes it?
Oh yeah, Hostage Taker, definitely a very powerful card once you have the mana to cast it and then cast the spell you take on the same turn, especially when you're playing against an opponent that doesn't have a strong way to interact with that.
So it's Chandra Torch of Defiance hitting the battlefield for loyalty abilities. The second one says +1, add red, red. We're going to use that on this Scrap Heap Scrounger, which is then going to activate the Heart of Kiran. You need 3 power to make that one into the flying 4/4 creature, other than just sitting as a vacant vehicle collecting parking tickets. It's going to attack in, and Fatal Push is going to take it down quite a feat, pushing a ship out of the sky.
Oh, and a big turn here for Jacob.
Oh, Vraska's Contempt eliminates the Chandra, and after we see really 2 threats come down to the battlefield, at the end of this turn, we are left with just the Scrap Heap Scrounger. 2 spells, eliminating, really the 2 biggest threats on the board. So it's Glintstream Siphoner continuing to do its work, and we have got 2 copies of that Hostage Taker right now, and we might just, oh no, it is just 1. That was an Arguel's Bloodfast. We're going to throw that one down, take the Scrounger, and it looks like we are going to be casting it for ourselves as well. 1 energy for Wilson, and suddenly he's the aggressive deck. He's got a 3-2. He's got this Hostage Taker. He's got Glintstream Siphoner. Life is good for Wilson.
Yeah, and Jacob showed a tremendous amount of patience this game. He recognized that, if he's seeing a Sarkhan on the other side of the table and the opponent's not discarding a card, that means there's likely Glorybringer in their hand. He left his mana open. He set up the Essence Scatter, and from there, this game has kind of played out exactly how he imagined it would, and he's in excellent position to take down the first game.
I think I see an Arguel's Bloodfast, a Vraska, and Vraska's Contempt, and a Champion of Wits in hand. We're going to throw down this Arguel's Bloodfast at the end step of Poncher. Jacob can just put 2 mana, put 2 life into it, draw an extra card, keep that hand full, and otherwise that Vraska's Contempt is going to be a great insurance policy for any of these really devastating creatures. And it's going to be Goblin Chainwhirler. That Glintstream Siphoner has swung its last swing. It's going to hit the graveyard, but it certainly did quite a bit of work already in this matchup. Drew several additional cards, and now that the Arguel's Bloodfast is out, that same capacity to really require it as a way to get that card advantage, just not there anymore.
Yeah, Glintstream Siphoner, it's one of these cards that is, likely the most powerful 2-mana thing you can do right now in Standard, and yet it hasn't been seeing a ton of play because of the prevalence of Goblin Chainwhirler. And here, in a matchup where the opponent has 4 copies of Goblin Chainwhirler, Jacob Wilson still just able to catch his opponent without a Chainwhirler in hand and able to essentially take over the game with that Glintstream Siphoner.
Unlicensed Disintegration, it's going to go for the Scrap Heap Scrounger. That does put it in the graveyard. There is the Glorybringer in there that got put into the graveyard by the Essence Scatter, so we could see Poncher next turn trying to bring that one back, but I mean, that's still a pretty tall order to fill because the time is running out. The Champion of Wits is available. There are cards in the graveyard. There's 7 mana right now. Another Champion of Wits could come down as soon as next turn. And we're going to play our land, and it is going to be kicking it back to Samuel Poncher. Really looking for a live draw. We are in top deck mode. The only option on board is this Scrap Heap Scrounger.
Yeah, so I'd like to point out last turn, Jacob Wilson, notice that he started using his Bloodfast during his main phase.
Yeah.
Doing that because he doesn't have any options that he could play with the mana he has available on his opponent's turn, hasn't hit a land drop yet, decides that it's worthwhile to dump this mana into this right now. And I think a lot of newer players, just because they can do something on their opponent's turn, they think that that's what they should be doing all of the time.
That's a great point. Thanks, Jake. So Pianalar hits the battlefield. Thopter joining it. 2 creatures in the way. Wilson unable to stop that, but still has these 2 aggressive creatures. Not a whole lot of downside in just swinging for the fences. There's also a Liliana Death's Majesty, still a Vraska's Contempt in hand. This Thopter is going to jump in front of the Champion of Wits. There is another one in the graveyard already. We might just see Wilson go for the activation, grab the 4/4, but it is going to be instead Liliana Death's Majesty. Let's go ahead and minus this, reanimate it, take away the Pianalar, spend the 3 mana, and now Jacob Wilson has got his own Pianalar, his own Thopter. Liliana into Hostage Taker into Pianalar. What a turn.
Yeah, that's some powerful magic.
Wow. Just suddenly the board is completely full. Sam Poncher thought that Pianalar might be his way out. It was a way to buy time, and it actually just ended up getting used against him to tighten the screws in this first game.
Yeah, Jacob Wilson just with an embarrassment of riches ends the game with Commit to Memory and Vraska's Contempt in hand, ready to go. He's got to be feeling good.
We're jumping into game 2 here. Poncher trying to rally a win here. He's 6-2. A win here, of course, does throw him into the 7-2 slot, keeps him in this tournament, keeps him running strong. Jacob Wilson going for the first play of the game. It is going to be a Sorceress Spyglass. Taking a look, I got to think, there's a couple of options. There's Heart of Kirin, there's Chandra, Torch of Defiance, there's Sarkhan.
Yeah, I think Sorcerer's Spyglass it seems very good in a matchup like this where your opponent has so many different things that require activations to do anything. And here he catches his opponent with a Chandra in hand. I imagine that's what he's going to name as a result.
Shuts it down, the mana ability, which we saw earlier, but also just the inevitability of that damage, which is so potent. Third turn, it's Doomfall. Taking a look at the hand, I assume, and now we are looking at Demanding Dragon, Glorybringer, and that Chandra. It's going to be 2 turns before Poncher can even start playing these threats, and he's going to be down one of them, whichever one that Wilson doesn't want to deal with. One of them has got that really devastating enter the battlefield ability. They either sacrifice a creature or take 5. Or this Glorybringer, which just is a hasty attacker, so it attacks the turn it comes in, and it looks like Wilson thinks that he is better suited to answer the Glorybringer than that Demanding Dragon. Yeah,
and that's something I would like to ask Jacob about at some point later on in the day. I guess it really is kind of 6 to 1, half a dozen the other.
They're both 5 mana dragons. They both come down. They do cool stuff. That might mean that Wilson is more expecting that he'll have a removal spell than a counter spell. And the removal spell, you've got a little bit more time, then you don't have to lose the 5 life specifically. But it's just going to be another Doomfall. Maybe that's what it was. I've got another Doomfall in this deck. Let's make it happen. Let's get rid of that too. The Chandra has no business coming down to the battlefield. I think that it hasn't hit the battlefield is very much telling that you were correct with your expectation out of that Spyglass. And Wilson, while he's not applying any pressure, this game looks very favorable for him. He's got a lot of knowledge about what Poncher's hand looks like. Pianalar is the first threat that we're seeing. And take a look at this. We saw it last time. There is that Hostage Taker in hand. We might just see Wilson throw it down and eliminate that card to play that Pianalar on a following turn.
Yeah, I mean, he needs 1 more mana to cast both on the same turn here. Walking Ballista, a card that's going to match up really nicely right now against what Samuel Poncher has. And Samuel Poncher, before drawing that PNLR, he's the deck that has to be asking the questions. He's the aggressor here. He wants to be applying pressure. And his hand was simply 2 answers. And when you're in a classroom, you have to find out your role. You have to know whether or not you're the teacher asking the questions or you're the student giving the answers. And in a game of Magic, it's very similar. And Samuel, at this point, finds himself in a situation where he needs questions and he only has answers.
Scrap Heap Scrounger comes down to the battlefield. It's going to try and put something together. We do see PNLR attack in the Walking Ballista, not interested in the trade, which means that, of course, there are greater machinations at work, and Jacob Wilson certainly has got some of them. This Hostage Taker, he might even be considering which one of these creatures he'd like at the moment. I think the PNLR.
I don't think he can play the Hostage Taker into the Unlicensed Disintegration that he knows about right now.
True.
I think he's trying to figure out how he's going to time the activation of the Walking Ballista that he has in play. So if he goes for the activation on his turn, then he gives Samuel the Poncher the opportunity to use his mana efficiently without Unlicensed Disintegration. But by simply passing the turn here and leaving open all of his mana, it forces Samuel Poncher to go without using that 3 mana on his turn. And then you can force your opponent to tap that mana on their turn, at which point it'll give you an opportunity to resolve your Hostage Taker unmolested and get to steal one of those creatures in the following turn.
Ooh. So 1 turn delay and really just trying to set up for the future turns. Jacob Wilson, he's 1 step ahead of the game.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really tight play from him.
Looks like we are going to use that PNLR's ability. We're going to try and activate this Walking Ballista in response to PNLR going for +1/+0. There's the Unlicensed Disintegration, and we're going to fire down both of those counters at the Scrap Heap Scrounger. This is prior to the activation resolving, but still, it's only got the 2 toughness at the end of the day, and now that is going to be 0 damage dealt. Only a PNLR on the battlefield at the end of this, and it's going to be Hostage Taker. Let's go ahead and go for the 3 mana. Now a Thopter, a Hostage Taker, and a PNLR. Jacob Wilson has turned the tables, but the playmat oriented the same, but certainly the cards switch sides.
Yeah, so Jacob, again, he timed this beautifully here. 2 Unlicensed Disintegrations in the opponent's hand. It's really hard to be timing a Hostage Taker when that's what you're up against. Your opponent has these really powerful instant speed removal spells. But he's able to find this window, to not even just find it, but to create this window for himself to get full value out of this Hostage Taker against an opponent who has the perfect answers in hand.
Goblin Chain
beautiful.
Comes down, eliminates the Thopter, deals 1 damage to Wilson, but it's still this Hostage Taker and the PNLR facing down this frankly reckless Goblin. Whirling Chains, I feel like that's something that you learn early on is not the most hospitable thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, it clearly is a very good workout, though. Have you seen him?
That's true.
Yeah.
That is true. You got to keep it in hand. You know, you can't be throwing them. It's not a goblin chain thrower. So we are going to go for the attack in. That chain whirler also was on the aggressive side of things. And it looks like we might have a fatal push in hand. That actually can combine. He does have the ability to get revolt because of this field of ruin that he's got on the far right side of his battlefield. Or you could just use the unlicensed disintegration. If that is that fatal push in hand, he could eliminate this goblin chain roller now. Oh, it might actually be... Okay, yeah, that is a fatal push. So that's going to eliminate this goblin chain roller while we have the revolt. That does mean that the field of ruin can continue to sit on the battlefield, though I'm not certain if it's going to have a whole lot of purpose in this matchup. There is some capacity to take down the Dragon Skull Summit, but there is a basic swamp in Poncher's deck.
Yeah, and I think that was definitely a consideration for Jacob. We saw him kind of like touching the field of ruin, but he decides not to go for it, and in reality, he was correct. Samuel does have that swamp in his deck, so it would have been a wasted revolt trigger had he actually attempted to kill the summit on that turn with the field of ruin.
We're going to see a cycle here of Canyon Slew, and it is going to be a duress. Let's take a look at the hand, see what we've got. It's Essence Scatter, so now it is a basic island against all for Jacob Wilson. He's going to have to draw pretty well, otherwise this Hostage Taker is going to have to go the distance. And there is Infernal Reckoning, a card that has been very highly sought after for the last week.
Yeah, Wafotapa played this last week to great success. He's the greatest control player that's ever touched a Magic card. A lot of people have been looking for Infernal Reckoning. This is just about the best answer one could have for a Scrap Heap Scrounger, and here we're going to watch it do what it does best.
Yep, there was that copy in the graveyard, and Jacob Wilson wasting no time. We're going to eliminate that. There is a negate in Poncher's hand. The consideration here is that he could protect it. It would actually happen. The other consideration, though, is that Wilson, he is sitting on a Vraska's Contempt. If he finds himself at a point where he really wants this off the table, he could use that one as well. He'll still gain 2 life.
Yeah, and Jacob, I imagine he's going to want to hold on to that Contempt. He knows about all these powerful dragons in his opponent's deck.
Mm-hmm.
But if it comes down to it, and he needs to, he does have the answer in hand. You're absolutely right.
Canyon Slew is going to cycle, and I can't quite tell what that one is.
It's either a Swamp or a Nicol Bolas.
No, that's Nicol Bolas. That's the one option checklist card for Nicol Bolas. There it is.
Ooh.
We're going to have to discard a card probably in response to that trigger. We are going to see Vraska's Contempt. No more time available to wait. It's interesting. The Nicol Bolas, you feel like it got low value. He didn't even end up having to discard a card, but that's probably a good thing. That's not the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
So Nicol Bolas gets its job done, by heading to the exile pile.
Yeah, and it's also worth noting that, the Nicol Bolas there would have been very powerful against a lot of different opponents. Jacob Wilson, he showed a great deal of patience by not firing off that Contempt at the Scrap Heap Scrounger.
Oh, yeah. Any other card, and we would have been looking at the 4/4. Jacob would have lost, his conditional answer, something like, let's say something like a Cast Down, right? Anyway, he has to discard it, and then Poncher's got the 7 mana to head into his next turn ready to transform it and have that Nicol Bolas the Arisen as such a powerful option. But now it's Demanding Dragon getting 5 life out of the way. We're going to have to draw 2, discard 2 at this point, but no opportunity to cast these spells in the interim. Just discards a Fatal Push and this Search for Azcanta. It's this 2-1 facing down a Scrap Heap Scrounger and this Demanding Dragon. Wilson down to 10, now going to be down to 5. Wilson is going to have to just draw amazingly if he wants to find his way out of this. There's the Field of Ruin activating. We're going to point it at one of these blue sources. Is this a consideration of just making sure that there's 1 less land to draw?
Yeah. Essentially, he's just thinning his deck by a single card.
It's non-zeros. Non-zeros are good when it comes down to the wire. He can't afford to wait any longer. Anything that doesn't keep him alive is going to be the end. Like he is now at that point to where if he does not draw a live card every turn.
Ooh. All right, so a Scarab God, and there are cards in the graveyard that are able to deal with this Demanding Dragon right now.
He could grab a Hostage Taker. Now, having 2 ways to deal with this is going to be significantly more difficult. I don't know if there are the tools in the graveyard right now to survive both of these dragons attacking. There is
The
the
Hostage
Glorybringer,
Taker's good enough.
because
to survive. Yeah.
it would hit you for 4 and he would end up at 1.
Yes. So
But then he could play his own Demanding Dragon the next turn. And he would have the 4/4 Hostage Taker. So we're going to take that one down. This is functionally eternalized, though not quite. Jacob Wilson is going to get some scries. Now, this is not something that that I particularly expected. Look at this, by the way. The Glorybringer wasn't able to attack. We're going to go ahead and bring back PNLR, throwing down a Thopter as well, and still, in abundance of mana, sees Torrential Gearhulk and Vraska's Contempt. Jacob Wilson just put it. He needed to draw live. That Scarab God did it. Oh my goodness. Suddenly we are attacking.
lethal. Yeah, so Jacob Wilson, the Hostage Taker that was reanimated was a 4/4 there, combined with that Scarab God that was which was also a 5/5, and the other champion that he had in play. He was able to sacrifice the Thopter, which he got back from the Scarab God. The Scarab God trigger dealt 2 damage to the opponent.
Yep.
Sacrificing the Thopter meant that there couldn't be a block on the other side, and Jacob Wilson was able to tempo that game out perfectly.
What a draw.
Just gorgeously played, well drawn, excellent match from Jacob Wilson, who's an amazing Magic player, somebody who has been at the very top of the game at different times over the last 5 years.
Absolutely. So with that, we've got more Magic heading your way. It is round 9 here at Grand Prix Los Angeles, and we'll be right back after this.